Hi, and welcome to another edition of Newsmakers Journal of the Vaccine Year. I'm Jerry Roberts. It is Friday, November 12th, and we have a special press clips edition this week. Speaking with Tyler Hayden, news editor of the Santa Barbara, excuse me one second, Santa Barbara Independent. Joseph Pulitzer famously defined news as that which is apt to be talked about. And you have certainly been producing a lot of news by that measure, because you've had some big talkers recently. First of all, I pulled you out of the Hahn trial, the murder trial, which you're also covering in your spare time. What's the latest on that, Tyler?
Yeah, I'd say we're about a quarter of the way through, about a month-long trial. And right now, the prosecution is running through essentially the foundation of their case. They're interviewing detectives. They're talking to the people who actually interrogated the defendant, Habish, and took evidence. So, you know, as these things play out, they're trials on TV. And when we write about them, sound kind of more interesting and dramatic than they are in person. So it's a very, very slow, meticulous process of logging each bit of information. But there have been some noteworthy moments today. In particular, the prosecution brought up a contract between Henry Hahn, the murder victim, and the defendant Pierre Habish, where they had, and it was both signed and dated by them, so they both read it, where they were supposedly going to enter into some kind of multi-million-dollar agreement wherein the defendant was going to bankroll this new venture and use patents and technology that had been developed by Henry Hahn, CBD and cannabis-related therapies. And it turns out, though, that the money that was supposed to be involved, which was a huge amount, kind of eye-popping amount in court, supposed to be $25 million put down by the defendant. Henry Hahn wasn't going to have to put down any money, but he was going to supposedly pull a salary every year. This was like their grand plan, seemingly. And the contract was actually found by Henry next to Henry Hahn's body in his bedroom when detectives searched his house. That money never existed. Pierre Habish was worth less than 10 grand, turns out. And it also turns out that he had pulled this kind of scammy type stuff with another group of investors in the energy sector years ago. It's sketchy on what exactly happened there.
So this presumably would go to his motive.
Yeah, exactly. And they brought up some text messages between him and an unknown woman, I think a friend or a former girlfriend, where he talks about, I just want to make enough money to move out of the country and to buy a house and to get women and live the dream, live the life. And so that again sort of speaks to his motive of why he killed.
Speaking of slow, meticulous processes, this is what, 6 years after the crime, correct?
Yeah, it is. And I who knows what went on behind the scenes for the prosecution to have to build its case and why it took so long. But he looks different now than he did during his initial arrest and his arraignment. He's a lot paler. He sits really hunched over in his chair. It's an eerie scene, and the courtroom's pretty empty. It's pretty quiet because of COVID regulations. This is the kind of thing where normally there'd be quite a bit of public interest and people sitting in and watching, but it's just the court people and a few reporters. And he just he never turns around, but he talks to his defense attorney every now and again. It's an eerie scene in there.
And remind me, is this being tried as a capital case or not?
No, it's not. Joyce Dudley, I hope I'm getting this right, but the DA decided to not try it as a death penalty case.
Certainly.
And it's a judge trial as opposed to a jury trial. So it's Judge Brian Hill who will make the final determination as far as his guilt and then his sentence. If he is found guilty, he'll be sentenced to life without prison. I'm pretty sure that was the deal with the DA's office.
Life without parole.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, life without parole. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Let's go on to a couple of these scoops that you've had. The most recent one, and the one that really went national, is this giant dormitory, which would be the largest dormitory in the world, to be partly bankrolled by Chuck Munger, partner of Warren Buffett, who is only giving the money, $200 million, if they do exactly what he says in the plans he has developed, which are, to say the least, controversial. What's going on?
Yeah, it is bizarre from beginning to end. So this guy, Charlie Munger, who's Warren Buffett's right-hand man at Berkshire Hathaway, been a billionaire investor for years, and then more recently been more philanthropic and donated towards, interestingly, dormitory projects at the University of Michigan. He built something at Stanford, it turns out, and now he wants to build something here. He tends to donate to places where he or family have gone to school. And his grandson went to UCSB. He previously donated about, I'm gonna get the number wrong, but he donated tens of millions to build visiting housing for physicists.
The Kavli.
Yeah. So he told UCSB and Chancellor Henry Yang that he would donate $200 million towards a new dormitory project, but he had final say over the plans, over the blueprints, and he fancies himself an architect and admits he's a amateur hobbyist architect. He never went to school for it, doesn't have a degree. It would misrepresent to say that he's doing everything completely by himself. On a piece of paper, he works with architects to actually draft the blueprints to meet seismic standards and safety standards and fire escapes and all that good stuff. But it's his vision, like his idea. And his idea for this particular dormitory is to basically build a giant 11-story, 1.68 million square foot box that is lined by windows. Like if you look at the artist rendering, it looks like, just a giant big building with a bunch of windows on it. But what it doesn't show is that 94% of the rooms inside don't have windows. They're single occupancy. They're 10 by 7. So they're about the size of jail cells. It's not being hyperbolic to say that. I mean, the standard jail cell is 9 by 7 or 9 by 6, depending where you are.
But they have this magical energy going through them that tells you whether it's daylight.
Right. So they have these
rhythms or something.
Right. They have these virtual windows that are supposed to mimic daylight.
Virtual windows.
Mimic sunrise and sunset.
Here I am at Oracle Park. Yeah.
Right. So, and his argument is that, housing is drastically needed at UCSB.
True.
Which is true. They've fallen way behind on building the housing that they need for their students and faculty. And so he's basically saying, listen, if you guys want to build a lot of housing, you have to do it this way. The trade-off is, hyper density and no windows for a lot of units, or else, but he doesn't really give an or else. It's just like, you want this done, this is how it's going to be done. It got to be done.
The money is contingent on you doing it this way.
The money is contingent on doing it. It's interesting. I mean, he's donating $200 million, he says, which is obviously a healthy chunk of change. The whole project would cost about $1.5 billion. So a lot of people are asking, like, why does he have such a huge say over this when it's, fraction of the cost, overall cost? But he hasn't budged. I mean, when this went viral, this story, and I will say I'm proud of that, but I'm most proud that the nickname that we gave it, Dormzilla, has caught on at papers and in op-eds across the country. It's great. There's a Bloomberg story recently where the columnist calls it Dormzilla all the way through. Anyway, he's completely dismissive.
Critics are idiots.
These guys are idiots. They don't know what the hell they're talking about. They're cowards. But he said some really bizarre stuff too. People don't care if they pee in a basement bathroom with no window. It's like, how do you equate living in a bedroom with taking a bathroom break down in the basement? It's bizarre. So Yeah,
Well,
there's
and one part of the outrage, and we used to say, what's the outrage factor on this story? I'd say the outrage factor on this is about 9.9.
yeah,
One part of the outrage is about the design, and the other part is about the process.
right.
Because there was no process.
There was no
right?
process. No, no. I mean, that was pretty shocking to me too, honestly, that UCSB. So I'm trying to get my hands on the agreement between UCSB and Munger for this. I got the runaround from UCSB for weeks. I finally figured out I have to put in a PRA request through the office of the president. So I'll get the runaround for another couple months from then. So I don't know when I'll actually get my hands on it, but there's some stipulation somewhere that he would give this money and this thing would just be rubber stamped by UCSB. There's no public review. There's no chance even for the campus's architectural design review committee, to look at it. And that's what sparked this whole thing off, because there was an architect on that committee who said, wait a minute, you guys just showed us this as if it's a done deal. It's written in stone. What the hell are we here for if we can't give input?
That's how you broke the story. So
Yeah.
How did you get to him?
So his letter was leaked, and I don't know how this happened. I don't know who did it, but his letter got leaked onto Reddit, onto the social network Reddit, and someone pointed me towards it. I found it, contacted him. He didn't want to say anything on the record. He was basically like, the letter speaks for itself. I didn't mean for it to go public. I got the sense that maybe he's not sorry it went public, because now there's.
Well, I bet he knew exactly what was going to happen.
Right. Yes. I mean, he might have leaked it. Who knows? But that's how I heard about it, and that's how I started reporting on it. It was just this. It just was sort of there online, and it kind of went from there. But talking to UCSB, they confirmed it, and and said, we love it.
They rolled out the trumpets and the red carpet.
Yeah, it was pretty. It was kind of obscene. It's inspired. It's revolutionary. It's just the
never
font.
Seen before.
Yeah. It's like, well, of course you haven't seen it before, because it's a prison that you're trying to put undergraduates into.
Well, and there's just enormous blowback on it, not only in the media, but institutionally among architects and at UCSB. And I was very interested in 6 professors of architectural history have come out and signed a letter against it. And I thought that one fellow you quoted was pretty on the money, spot on about his career.
Yeah, no, there's. I've been looking, because it's like when you report on these things, you try to find sort of the counterpoint to the main narrative out there. Maybe someone out there supports it, thinks it's kind of an interesting idea. No one, like no one thinks it's a good idea. Even architects who are like normally kind of contrarian and want to be shaking things up and disruptive, they're like, this is, we don't know what this is.
Yeah. Two quick points about the university role in this. One of the points that was made in that letter that we just referenced was that the university has fallen down on its commitments for housing under the long-range development plan dating to 2010. And I guess there's at least one lawsuit and more, and that they were trying to fix it in one swell swoop or one fell swoop or whatever.
Right.
Yeah. So is there any truth to that?
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly right. I mean, they know they're behind and they're out of compliance with their housing agreement with the county. So instead of housing a certain percentage of their student population and their faculty and staff on campus or in campus housing that's off-site, they're now trying to find places to rent out in Santa Barbara, Goleta, mainly
living in their cars. Yes,
living in their cars, living in vans. So it's a major regional issue that's been percolating and really kind of came to a head not that long ago, interestingly enough. And then the university has put this out as the sort of giant silver bullet solution. Just wipe the slate clean. Like, okay, we've caught up to housing, and then we probably gave ourselves some breathing room, and we're good after that. And so there like none of the discussions are suggesting, or none of the blowback is suggesting that UCSB doesn't have a housing issue. That's made very clear. It's just people are really not on board with how they're trying to handle it and how they're trying to solve it.
And I would just add, the role of Chancellor Yang in this, he ends up in like the 21st paragraph or something. When I worked at UCSB, the word was, Henry has his hands on everything and his fingerprints on nothing. And that's kind of the way it seems with it.
I think that's how he operates. I think he's doing it this way in this case too. I mean, from what I know, sort of in off the record conversations, he and Munger kind of are buddies. I don't think they're like necessarily old best friends, but like they're personal friends, and I guess he's really just taking his cue from Yang is taking his cue from Munger and is just kind of running with it. And I don't know.
Well,
I don't know how
he's a hard science guy, so I'm sure the Kavli Institute stuff forged a connection with them. And
totally.
my experience, the one group, Henry hates to offend the faculty, but he really hates to offend fundraiser. I mean,
yeah. Right.
So,
right. So I don't know how you reverse course on this, or I don't know if you do. Like, I don't know what their public relations department's doing right now. I wouldn't want to be.
Poor Andrea Estrada, our friend Andrea Estrada.
No, I feel for her truly, because it's like she's between a rock and a hard place.
Go out there and defend the undefensible.
Yeah, really. Yikes.
All right, let me ask you about another piece that had a lot of people talking, and that is your latest. Well, it was in your newsletter, and we should note that Tyler sends out a weekly newsletter.
Weekly or every other week, so it depends on the week.
Yeah, and subscribe there. I want to ask you about the tone of that after we're done here. But one of them was the latest on Bellosguardo, and you're the guy locally who's really bird dog that whole scandal, I guess you could say. And the latest is, now while the public continues to be denied access, the daughter of Ariana and Michael Huffington gets married up there in a big do with presumably Jeremy Lindemann officiating. I don't know what's going on.
Maybe he was the ring bearer or something, or the flower girl. Yeah, no, it's I happened to be on East Beach the day after the wedding, and so heard and noticed all the trucks leaving, taking down all the tents and the infrastructure that was set up, and it got me curious and thinking about what the heck is the latest with that place, because it's been almost, let's see, so it's like there's so much history, it's like where do you even begin? I mean, the foundation became a thing in 2014, right? So
this is the 23-acre mansion of the late Clark, who was a resident of Santa Barbara, name only, but paid a fortune every year to keep up this place, which is now acceded to as a nonprofit appointed by the city back before the earth cooled the last time. And all we know is that the ex-mayor's possibly ex-boyfriend has turned it into his personal man cave, as you put it in your newsletter, and nobody else can get near the place.
Right. Yeah. I mean, what we were told as a city, as the public, going on 8-9 years ago, was that this spectacular piece of property, as you said, up on the bluff there, 23 acres, a giant mansion, and then beautiful manicured grounds, would be someday soon opened up to the public as a center for the arts, because that's how Huguette Clark bequeathed it to this foundation. And now it's its mission, to open it as a place to foster and promote the arts. And the foundation went a step beyond it in their founding papers, because there's been a lot of discussion of like, what does that mean to promote and support the arts? Does that mean it gives out grants? Does that mean you sell it off and put the proceeds into existing arts organizations? But they say in their founding papers, we want to open this up as a public community center, as a place for the public to view art, to appreciate art, to learn about art, paintings. Maybe we'll bring in concerts and symphonies from the Music Academy of the West. Maybe this will be sort of it'll be a mini Getty here in Santa Barbara. And that's what we were told. And so people have been kind of wondering and curious since then, since 2014, when this foundation formed, okay, when's that going to happen? What's the deal? When are the gates that have been closed for decades going to open, and we'll be able to maybe pay $10 ticket and tour the place? And nothing has really happened since then. I mean, there's been private tours, there's been fundraisers, there's been giant weddings, as you said, and virtually zero communication from the foundation and from
no accountability, no oversight, no.
So they never meet. The board never meets.
Chaired by Dick Wolf of Law.
Chaired by Dick Wolf. They don't discuss their finances. So people on the board don't know where finances are coming and going from, where the income is and where it went. And they just basically kind of like flown under the radar for all these years.
But they do pay a hefty six-figure salary to the aforementioned Jeremy Lindemann.
So they pay six-figure salary. So if you add it up over the last 8 years, he's pocketed about close to $1 million in salary. And what do they have to show for it? I can't tell you. Other than a couple weddings, he submitted plans to the city last year of how this might be eventually open to the public. It was sort of like very preliminary tours of what looked like just a part of the house and maybe a little bit of the grounds. I mean, so that is something. I mean, we have to acknowledge that. Like, at least he put in this application, but I could have, looking at it, I could have written it in 3 hours under deadline.
Exactly what he did.
Yeah, it looks like that's what he did, because these applications are never deemed complete by city staff at first. Nobody just gets it perfect right out of the gate. But he omitted so much information that they basically had to they gave him a long list, which isn't unusual either. But what was unusual was how long the list of omissions were, and how many questions were left to staff before they said, well, yeah, you can start putting bathrooms up there and accessibility ramps and so on and so forth. So I don't know, man, to get paid $1 million to write a half-assed proposal after 8 years.
When's the last time you talked to Lindemann?
We shoot each other emails. He answers my emails maybe once out of every 8 times I send him one. He did this.
He's a real jerk, not to put too fine a point on it.
Yeah. He answered this last one to say, I'm gonna resubmit my application, soon, or likely.
Sure.
Likely within the next week. So actually, just before this, because you reminded me, I shot him an email to say, where's it at? Can you show me a copy? If you haven't filed it, why not? What's the holdup? I probably won't hear back.
And meanwhile, a day or two after your most recent story on this appeared, the state attorney general, is looking into the tangled tax affairs of the Bellosguardo Foundation. Huh?
So it turns out what the foundation hasn't done, in addition to many things, is file its paperwork properly for the last 4 years, where a nonprofit, a private foundation of its type, that has a certain amount of assets, needs to have an independent audit of its books, of its bookkeeping, and they haven't done that. They do have an accounting firm here in town that prepares their tax returns and their 990s, but they haven't met the requirements as laid out by California's Charity of Trusts to have those filings done independently as well, to have a third party audit them and look at them. So now the Department of Justice gave them a hard deadline saying, you guys need to turn this in by the end of this month, actually, which did seem quick. It's like 3 or 4 years worth of bookkeeping. And the DOJ said, you need to turn it in by then, or like, we're gonna revoke your license, essentially. Like, we're gonna revoke your nonprofit status. In the meantime, they're considered delinquent. They can't raise money. They can't do any of the stuff that they supposedly should have been doing over the last 8 years, making partnerships with arts organizations, laying out a fundraising plan, operational plan, all that stuff that goes into operating a multi-million-dollar institution. So we'll see. Yeah,
For which Lindemann has zero background training or experience.
Right. Before this, before this, he was a political consultant, and then apparently worked for his family's print shop. He's about my age. He's like 30, mid 30s. You know, anybody who put me in charge of a multi-million-dollar institution would be crazy. But somehow he managed it. And like you said, it goes back to his relationship, personal and professional, with our former mayor, who was in charge
Schneider.
who was in charge of creating the board, who then, so she picked the board, and then the board picked Lindemann. It's like, you don't have to connect the dots.
Well, she picked the board. Yeah, they were all her contributors.
They're all supporters. And even when they were creating the board, Lindemann was calling people like former mayor, late Mayor Hal Conklin, saying, you know, you're going to be on the board, and you're going to give, excuse me, Schneider's congressional campaign $100,000, because at the time she was trying to run for Congress.
Forgotten that piece of
yeah.
Right.
So he was making the rounds, basically shaking people down to support her bid for Congress. That didn't work. So they got enough people who, you know, are enough sycophants of hers, or Dick Wolf's, or whatever, or just the idea of being, you know. And
wasn't Sheila Lodge on the committee and then resigned or something?
Sheila Lodge she got the ball rolling on this, and really started the process of what everyone thought was going to be the end result of turning this into an arts institution for the public. And I don't know what happened exactly. And we should ask her. I don't know if she'd want to talk about it on record, but somehow Helene and Jeremy and that crew kind of wormed their way in and took over.
All right. Let me ask you about one more story you had yesterday. I think it was posted about you rounded up, which was very useful, the extent to which various public agencies are not complying with our vaccine mandate or test various ones. And the sheriff's department is like, what is going on over there? You got 161 out of 295 deputies who wanted to do that, but only 36 have registered to be tested.
Right. Yeah, that kind of blew me away too. I mean, so the county's policy is you get vaccinated. If you decide not to, okay, but you get tested weekly. That was made very clear. It went into effect October 18th, I believe it was, middle of last month. When that people either had to do one or the other, choose one or the other. And yeah, as the data from the county's human resources department shows, is that there's 161 patrol deputies. So these are guys out and about, not in the jail, not bailiffs in the court, but out in the field, who chose not to be vaccinated, but still haven't been tested either. And most of them, as you said, haven't even registered to be tested. And the only information I could get was from the human resources department, who said that the deputies have had concerns about the testing and registration process. I don't know what that means, whether they think their information is, medical information is at risk, like it's not being protected enough by the county, or they're just being defiant for the sake of being so, or who knows. But because I couldn't get anybody from the Deputies Sheriff's Association to talk to me, that's the local union representing these guys, who's leading these talks with the HR department. So I don't know the nature of those concerns.
You ought to call up Das Williams, because he's gotten about $8.5 trillion from the deputy.
You know what? I will do that. I will ask him. That's a good question. At least he could maybe put me in touch with someone over there who might give me an answer.
And meanwhile, the fire department is almost fully compliant.
Yeah, they're fully compliant with testing or vaccinating. I mean, so about 60 something firefighters chose not to be vaccinated. Okay, fair enough. That was their choice. But they registered to be tested, and as of this Monday, have all been tested and all have been cleared for duty. So, yeah, we've heard a lot about vaccine hesitancy across the country, but the whole testing hesitancy, I don't get that. Maybe there's a good reason for it. I don't know what that is, but if I hear it, I'll I'll report it.
And meanwhile, the city, where the mandate became an issue in the just completed mayor's race is also kind of slow on the uptake on this, huh?
Yeah, they've got another few weeks before I think it's December 1st, where people have to be vaccinated. So we'll get those numbers next month.
And the star pupil is Santa Barbara Unified School District.
Yep, Santa Barbara Unified's doing great. They're like in the upper 90s. They've had a handful of teachers, upper 90%, handful of teachers who didn't get vaccinated by the deadline, and so were put on non-paid leave, and a few support staff as well. But a very small number. I mean, for all the hullabaloo out there over teachers are going to quit en masse and schools are going to shut down. It's like that didn't pan out at all. And then Cottage and Sansom too, I think it's worth noting, are 98, 99% vaxxed up doctors and nurses. So again, that whole you're going to lose half of your nursing staff to this outrage, just a bunch of nonsense. But what's kind of interesting and a little distressing was that Marion Medical Center up in Santa Maria, they didn't give any data at all. They wouldn't. They said we support the president's mandates or his direction, and we're doing the best we can, but like there were no numbers, which is sort of surprising because they've been very forthcoming in the past about their operations and their staff. So maybe there's something there they don't want to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, I think a lot of it, goes to the unions, and they never want to give in on anything, and
Right.
Shouldn't this be a bargaining issue and blah blah blah. So it gets off on all these process arguments that have less to do with whether people are healthy or not when they're making public on our dime. All right, let me ask you the last thing. So you got this newsletter, which is getting a lot of traction, a lot of attention, but I'm just curious, as an old editor,
What is it?
There's a different tone to it than there is on your stories.
Yeah.
To a certain extent. What is that? I mean, have you talked to Mary Ann about that? Do you kind of take it play by play, or how do you do that?
Yeah, it's totally a fair question. And it's sort of been a evolution. I started this newsletter, which is one of many that the paper's putting out. We have one from the art department. Matt has one on food. Nick's got his column. And it started off just like a very straight kind of newsy type wrap up of what had happened this last week, maybe what government meetings were going to come up. But as I started doing it, I never thought I would get into this, because I never fancied myself an opinion columnist or anything like that. I just have always done sort of straight news. I sort of developed a little bit of a voice to talk about some of these issues in ways that you can't in a regular news piece, and kind of like get between the lines. Because I feel like with news stories, you have to like so often dance around the issue or the nut of the story you're talking about. And so this was kind of my way of just like cutting to the quick on some of this stuff. And the Bellosguardo one was really kind of I think as you put it, like the first sort of scorched earth take. And so it's a column. It's an opinion column. And I think maybe we need to label it more clearly as such, so people don't think they're
well, it was interesting because when you wrote that, everybody in town was passing it around and stuff. And I wrote, why isn't this in the newspaper?
Yeah.
Then it turned out
you got it in the newspaper, so thank you. Yeah.
But then I thought to myself, how is Mary Ann toggling back and forth between, Tyler? I guess Nick does it.
So I'm kind of modeling myself after Nick, who's my boss and been a mentor in a lot of ways, where you have to put on your reporter hat to report news, and then you put on your columnist hat to do either the Angry Poodle for him or this newsletter for me. And if one ever starts to bleed into the other, I or one of the editors who looks at it will pick up on it and rein it in or pull it back. Or
you had the one tearing Barrett Reed's face off.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of commentary about that. And if I'm not mistaken, there is a paragraph excised at the bottom,
Yeah.
isn't there, about some?
Good eye. So yeah, so the paragraph you're talking about that went into the newsletter, Marianne took out when it went online, and that was just because she didn't. I sort of like teased a bit of information that I didn't put out there, and she just thought that was kind of bush league. I don't know. She just didn't like.
You had enough stuff.
Yeah, I had enough stuff.
I mean, this was by then example number 19.
Right. It was piling on already by that point, and it just didn't need to be there. So she edited it out for the actual site that it got published on. So, if you or anybody who's just watching this like feels my opinion is getting in the way of my news reporting or vice versa, like I do want to hear about it. Like I'm being very,
seriously, I just find it fascinating from a professional perspective, because I am old enough to remember when newspaper guys first started writing blogs back in the 90s, and it, nobody kind of noticed, because it was like, oh, that's just my blog,
right, that's my side thing.
Wait a minute, it has it's still connected to the institute, to the news organization. Totally. So then we got into like slippery standards about this is my blog, but I'm gonna, it's right. Hard. So I find you standing astride the past and future of the
thank you.
Journalism.
Yeah, I think there is a precedent there, and I think you see that a lot too with people's, like, with journalists' social media accounts. Even if they don't have, a blog or a newsletter, you watch these guys on MSNBC, or you read these guys in the New York Times, and they're all just very straight reporting, just the facts, ma'am. And then you go to their Twitter accounts or their Tumblrs, and it's like, whoa, okay, so that's how you really feel about that. And it's, I guess there's precedent going back to those blog days. I guess I would ask you, was there a version of that before there were blogs? Like, would guys in print papers write a news story, but then have a column in the same paper, or a column the next week?
No, it was very rare, and everything was always labeled very cleanly.
Yeah.
And unless the publisher got a bug up his ear, about something and demanded that some editorial appear on the front page or something.
Right.
And as you recall, that was sort of the central ethical issue here with the paper in the meltdown, was the news and opinion distinction.
So that's what we want to avoid. It's like,
well, except it's it really has become almost moot.
Yeah.
With all the voices, and it's hard to, but it's good to know you guys are still thinking about it. And,
absolutely. I mean, it goes through the regular checks and balances, and it's not like I just have free reign to kind of throw stuff out there. And I think truthfully, it does speak to just staffing levels too at local papers. People got to I have to be a photographer some days too, and I have to be the social media arbiter, when I see comments that are way out of line. So it's like everybody's doing a little bit of everything. And if a news reporter does opinion columns now and again, and it's done fairly and professionally and to the standards that the paper holds itself to, I think that's okay. I hope that's okay. And if people disagree, they can write in.
All right. Tyler Hayden's newsletter, sign up for it at independent.com. Tyler, I'll let you get back to the trial. Thank you so much for taking the time. And as we were talking about, reporters get on streaks just like ball players do, and you've been riding a hot one. So
thank you.
I hope a few more come your way, brother.
Yeah, thanks, Jerry.
All right, take care.
See ya.